Hello, everyone. I hope you are enjoying the morning so far. It has certainly been a whirlwind with amazing presentations happening. I'm thrilled to introduce our next speaker, David Meisner, and he is going to be talking about cutting edge bracing. I'm going to turn it over to David for him to introduce himself and to start his presentation. So, David, take it away.
Thank you very much, Laurel. And I truly appreciate being here. And I understand there's a large crowd behind this computer, which I'm very excited about. And hopefully you guys can generate a lot of questions for me at the end, because often that's where a lot of the maybe some of the real important stuff comes forward. It's those individual questions driving this presentation forward. So looking forward to that part of it. So you'll see, hopefully on this first slide, there's a picture of my son, Ethan, and I. We are both blessed with CMT 1B. And I think that's important to at least express to everybody that I am part of the family here. And so I'm not exactly certain how I fell into this industry of orthotics and prosthetics, but I think it's because I've always been mechanically inclined, and I'm fortunate that I got involved with this because little did I know that I would need bracing later in my life. CMT was very prevalent in my family with my grandfather first, but he was a golfer late into his 80s. All of his three children had CMT, and then it was passed along to me. So I grew up with it, and I think that's a big piece of maybe who I am today. I do practice orthotics and prosthetics, and our main office is in Albany, New York. So I guess the big question is, why get a brace? I know it's cool, but why do we really choose to use a brace? And I guess it really just comes down to these simple basic features. It's to improve our balance. It's to allow us to walk where we want to walk. It's to support the body. When we support the body, it can greatly reduce the fatigue, which for me can certainly allow me to do a lot more throughout the day, the stuff that you want to do throughout the day. And then, of course, those times that you might fall, hopefully it can reduce the risk of injury by falling less, or maybe even falling in a little bit more of a controlled nature. The term cutting edge brace, it's a little bit of a catch-22 here. We all want the latest and greatest, but we certainly don't want our braces cutting us and such. But I thought that was an entertaining title to my presentation, because a lot of people do get injured from their braces and such, and those are things we want to learn from today on maybe how to address that and prevent injuries from happening by controlling the mechanics and such. So what is a brace? It's as simple as a foot orthosis. So we're very brilliant in our industry with these terminologies: foot orthotic, SMO, AFO, knee orthoses. Well, we're very redundant. All those terms mean is the body segment that is being controlled. So it pertains to everything in the body. At TLSO for your back brace, or wrist hand orthoses, WHO. But we all are very familiar with the terminology AFO. So that's an ankle foot orthosis. So when I do my talks, I find that sometimes I can get very confusing for people, because I flip back and forth between those who might be pronators, very flat foot, or those who have a cavus foot, which is a high arched foot. And I think it's pretty fair to say that the classic characteristic associated with CMT is a higher arched foot. Some don't have a higher arched foot. It might just look fairly neutral, but they all have a tendency to twist their ankles and such. So that is lateral instability, or outside instability. So I'm going to largely talk today about bracing for the classic characteristics. So it's a higher arched foot, just so we all really understand that. And when looking at yourself, if you have a very flat foot, and some people pronate a significant amount with CMT. Sometimes when you develop later in life, you get weakness over both sets of muscles fairly rapidly, and that can potentially cause that flatter foot. So when I'm talking about controlling and the mechanisms of controlling, a lot of it today will be showing you straps to control this cavus foot. And so when we talk about a cavus foot, how does that present itself? Well, these images are pretty significant, showing how those heels become tilted in. And there we call them an inverted heel. But typically what occurs to create those heels that tilt in, it's the forefoot, so the front of your foot, that's driving this mechanism. So we have what is called a plantar flexed first ray. And the first ray is the ball of your foot. And it's that ball of your foot that has a very strong muscle that stays strong while others weaken around it. And so that forefoot will drive where the hindfoot goes. And here's a good image showing what that forefoot is doing. So if you can see I don't know if I can use my counter here. I can. Hopefully you guys can see my counter, but I'm in the center image here, and I'm showing you how this part of the foot, the ball of your foot, that is connected to a very strong muscle and pronaos longus, and basically that drives this aspect of your foot down. So when you walk, you can't walk with this part of your foot up in the air. So what happens? This part of your foot comes down to the ground. When that comes down to the ground, it tilts everything in the very back, and it tilts it all to that inverted heel that we talk about. So it becomes very important that we support the outside of your foot, so the lateral aspect of your foot. So on a simple scale, how do we start to address that? So if you look at this image at the very top, you can see from a thickness standpoint, it's a lot thicker to the outside. And all depending on your foot, sometimes we have it just as thick here as we do right here. So you've got this very large wedge right here underneath the fourth, third, second, and fifth toe. So when you're standing on your insert with your plantar flexed first ray, this is a typical characteristic. So you can see here that this ankle has been pushed out sideways. And you can really see down here that the heel is tilting. And the front of this insert, so this is a traditional insert without this forefoot posting built into it. And you can see on this side where the posting is there, and it just looks so much straighter. So now if we compare this black insert to the blue one over here, this subtle difference, now this foot is really weight bearing where it's supposed to be weight bearing. That is critical to any kind of bracing, is to get this positioning, to get your body in the correct sort of alignment, to let those muscles, to let those bones function as they were originally designed to function. So for some of us, we're much more flexible than others. A simple insert might be able to manage many people, especially when they're younger. The older we get, the more stiff we get, at least I do, and the harder it is to control. So this is why I think in many ways it's critical to have your foot positioned in the correct position as long as possible. And I don't mean long as in 12 hours in a day. I mean starting young. If you start to feel you're twisting those ankles and that you're inverting, well, over time, and it's going to happen year after year, you will become tighter. Your body will change. So if you look at this AFO, we require a lot more forces to hold this body straight than a simple insert. So this strap is harnessed on the inside of the brace, and it is pulling medial. So it's pulling this way to direct that foot over. So I know you guys can see the difference between this leg and this leg. So the unsupported leg. And then this individual needed more support that we just couldn't achieve here. So we added an additional strap on the inside here, pulling the tibia over as well. So that's a lot of force there. And also this little wing down here gets extended out along the outside of the ball of the foot to help hold this in place as well. All right, so that's called forefoot adduction. So this forefoot, when the foot inverts like this forefoot goes this way. So to manage that, we try to push the forefoot this way, and we try to drive the hind foot that way. And to not let those pronators aside here, we do the exact opposite with the pronators. So we can harness the straps the opposite way, harness this one the opposite way. So I didn't want to leave you guys out of it. So a lot of this help, if you can get the body in the right location, it helps prevent certain tendons from shortening up over time as well. And that Achilles tendon that's connected to your calf muscle, that's also a very important tendon to keep stretched out, because if it is a super strong, huge tendon, and if it's not always being stretched like through every single step that you make, then over time, like years, it can become tight. So another thing as far as giving stability to the body, it's very important to stabilize the body side to side, like what we were just talking about. This device and others do an excellent job stabilizing the body with torsion. So rotating the foot in regards to the knee. So if you're all sitting down and you sort of look at your knees bent at 90 degrees, you can twist your foot in and out. All right. That's called tibial torsion. You can twist that foot in and out. When you stand, that locks, and that twisting now is happening up at the hip. And it's critical that we stabilize that as well, because we can stabilize your hips by staying below the knee joint with this type of AFO. So these kind of AFOs are becoming more and more popular, more and more common, because we really understand more and more how important it is to try to stabilize that tibial torsion as well. So this is a critical device that is certainly new to the market. So standing stability and balance, that is key. So this is a fellow who, it was important for him to be able to stand in a crowd and be able to have normal conversations without hanging onto a piece of furniture, and just be in and amongst his peers. So this is a fairly strong device that also has that tibial torsion control, but he doesn't have any dorsiflexors or plantar flexors. So that's the foot going up and down. But luckily, he was, in some ways, so weak that we could really position his foot in a nice, solid, stable position. And wow, he could stand. And one of the things that I think is super critical to this photo is he could never put his hands tight against his body like this to help me take this photo for him to pull up his shorts. Typically, his arms would be straight out, helping with his own balance, as we all know what that's like. So building a stronger device that can give that standing stability is often quite critical as well. So where do we begin? If we start with these carbon AFOs, I generally begin with the prefabricated carbon AFO. They are very repeatable, meaning that if you break one and good for you for breaking it because it means you're using it. But if you do break it, they're fairly easy to order and to replace. And these do break. And it's just part of the mechanism between building a brace that's too strong to not break. And then when it's too strong to not break, it's then too strong to really give any kind of dynamic properties. So we don't want that either. So we want it lightweight, we want it strong, and we want it dynamic. And hopefully you can see inside this shoe, it's one of those foot orthotics that I put on top of the prefabricated carbon AFO. So I customize every one of these carbon AFOs, the prefabricated. Never do I send one out without one of these foot orthotics really managing that foot structure. And I know this one's super colorful, so you can sort of see her sock, but hopefully you can see within here there is an SMO. And an SMO is called a supramalleolar orthosis. So it's a little bit taller, a little bit stronger, a little bit more support, but still quite dynamic and flexible. And so that offered her a little bit more stability to that device. Once we progress beyond carbon prefabricated devices, we can get into doing custom carbon energy storing. They're really lightweight, and we can really direct these forces to what we want to achieve. If you've maintained good range of motion, then we can simplify things. We can have a fairly small device like this because we're really just controlling the dorsi and plantar flexion. But once we start to need a little bit more control of that foot, we have to come up a little bit higher. I like these devices that come up much higher on our bodies. And that's another thing that's evolved over time, is coming up a lot taller on these devices is critical to get the flexibility to these struts. And in this case, it's about getting that rotational control by grabbing the tibia real high. So how do we know which is the correct design for you? Well, a lot of the times it comes down to determining what your goals are. What do you really need? What does your body need? What are you wanting to do? Are you wanting to stand strong and aggressively? Or you want to walk, hike? Are you running? Often I think of a device like a tool. So I'm a guy who loves to use tools. Some of these devices are not going to achieve all goals. And that's where you might need to, because of insurance issues, you might need to, buy yourself a separate device. I used to use this silicone AFO. I loved it at the beginning when I started to wear bracing because I do a lot of water sports, so it was very simple. It allowed me to have good side-to-side medial lateral control, and then it helped with my drop foot. What it didn't do at all is help propel me forward, and that's what these carbon braces do. So I talked briefly about the strength versus the rigidity of an AFO. We can make these devices not break. And these carbon braces are critical, and I think they're exciting for us because of how lightweight they are and how dynamic they are. But the reality is it's going to be like a paperclip. The more you bend it, eventually it will fail and eventually it'll break. If you compare that to making the device so darn strong that it's not going to break, well, then potentially that device is just far too rigid and it isn't doing the properties that you really want it to. Okay, shoe styles. They're always a challenge. And, generally what I'm recommending to people is to find shoes with stability. So when I talk about stability, I want there to be a good width of this heel counter, or of this heel. Okay, the heel counter is here, which stabilizes your whole foot on top of this heel. If you think about a pyramid, think about that pyramid. It's very difficult to push over or roll a pyramid because of its shape. So the wider you go with your shoe on the bottom, the tread pattern, and see how nice and wide this is, even the forefoot, but there's the hind foot. The wider that is, the more stable it is. And of course, it doesn't make sense just to have something super wide and not have some structure up above. All of these shoes have nice structure up above too to help stabilize the foot. Keen. I like Keen. I seemingly am liking Keen these days. Sometimes you can actually get shoes with less stability if they're deep, like this one. This one's more canvasy style. If your AFO has all of that strength at the ankle, then you actually don't need as much strength up above because the AFO is providing that, but you still need that solid base of support. But if you're just wearing foot orthotics or a very simple type of AFO, then having a little bit more stability is better in the structure of the shoe. So talking about specific footwear. So these ones are the ones that I typically highlight to my patients. New Balance, Brooks, Orthofeet, Clarks. You can find a lot of dressier style shoes with Rockport Clarks. Billy Footwear, that's a new company that's sort of come out. That seems to be a fantastic company directly designed to help with people wearing AFOs or foot orthotics. They've got incredible zippers on them to allow this much easier to don. And look into them. What I love about Zappos, if you're buying your shoes online, and it's hard, sometimes you have to order 10 to get one that you like. But there is a little tab that you can flip, a little check mark on AFO friendly shoes, and you can probably pick up a whole host of other shoes that are useful, that are good, that I haven't spoken as a name brand here. So at least in the United States, and I know that people are from around the world, but probably this is consistent with others, is, what's the process of getting a brace? One of the critical things that I believe is true with CMT is that we have a progressive disease. So that means we don't really need to adhere to the 5-year plan. So Medicare pretty well sets the standard for everybody in the United States. All private insurances follow the rules of Medicare. And we like these, or they ask that they last 5 years. But Medicare has provisions. If your dog chews it and renders it useless, then it can be replaced. If you drive over it with your car, and hopefully your foot's not in it, then you can actually get that brace replaced. If you gain weight or lose weight and the device is no longer functioning for you, then it can be replaced. If you have a progressive disorder and your needs are greater, then you can get a new device. So that's the important thing, is you don't have to wait those 5 years. And I think if we all think about ourselves, and we think about ourselves 5 years ago, were you the same 5 years ago as you were today? So no, I wasn't. You probably weren't either. So that's some of the stuff that's really important to talk to your practitioner about. So you need an original prescription, and you do need a visit to your doctor. They need to document in their notes why you need a new device. And that can be simple things like you've gained weight, lost weight, all those other items that I spoke about. When you do an evaluation with someone like me, an orthotist, I send back to the referring physician a detailed written order. That has to be written. We have to get those 2 items. Then we have to get a copy of the notes from the physician. All of these things work together to allow me to produce something for you. And I think the key for everything is to always communicate with your practitioner. So hopefully I have left enough time. I think I've left about 10 minutes here for there to be questions and such. And I again want to thank everybody for allowing me to speak to you. And I hope that you've learned a little bit. And let's see what I can do here to minimize the screen just a little bit. And maybe I can have Laurel ask me some questions if there might be some presented. Okay, here's one. So do you know of anyone who makes carbon fiber braces? Do you know any? So do you know, here's the rest of the question. Do you know anyone who can scan the legs when they make braces so they better fit? All right, so these carbon fiber braces are always, I'm always going to recommend you to go to a certified orthotist. And I think you should look at the credentials of the orthotist. I am an American board certified orthotist, and there are other certifying bodies that do not have the educational qualifications that an ABC certified practitioner has. I think experience is really important to manage CMT, because it is a very tricky disorder to control from a bracing perspective. We are, I would say, the most challenging of the pathologies that I see out there. In some ways, we're very subtle, but having a good, strong brace is what is important to get a good functioning brace for you. I personally am not a fan of the scans that the scanners that are available for, at least historically, I'm not a fan of these scanners, because you've really got to put that foot into a position that, and sometimes takes two hands. And I have at times brought in a technician to help me cast someone. So we now have four hands to hold the foot in the right position and to sometimes rotate the tibia to get the foot in the right position. You cannot achieve that with a scan. So I think the scanners will come, and they will only be useful for those simple pathologies or simple feet that you do not have to apply a three-dimensional correction to. We can do it a little bit with positioning. Remember, I was talking about that tibial torsion with when your knee is at 90 degrees. We can cheat the system a little bit, and we can scan it that way, but needs to be left for people who don't have a very aggressive pathomechanical thing that I'm trying to fix or repair or adjust or control. Okay, how often should you get new braces? I have carbon braces that are over 2 years old. Well, it all depends. So if it's a prefabricated AFO, they can certainly last. Some people can go years and years, and they definitely do become more flexible with time, and yet still not broken. But it all, in my opinion, comes down to what is feeling right to you. If your goals are being met, if you are doing well with your devices, and you're not getting callousing or any issues, if you're at the end of the day, you're achieving all of the goals you want and you're happy, then it's probably still functional. But if there is a problem, if you look at your carbon brace and you start to see that the weave is starting to come apart, then it's time. And sometimes it's just you can't tell, and you have to look, you meet with your practitioner, and sometimes I catch things that the individual didn't catch. Typically I send these carbon custom systems out to labs that specialize in making the braces. They have really refined how they do it. They have spent a lot of time and effort, and they repeat over and over again, making the same brace, and they perfect it. So I wear fat braces, so from a company called Biomechanical Composites. I think they've done a tremendous job with repeating their device. I think that they have a system that seemingly works. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not going to fail before that 5 years, or sometimes you can get a lot longer than 5 years. But you got to keep an eye on things. I know a number of individuals wear Neuro Swings. I'll show you that. I actually tried these Neuro Swings out, and there's a lot of features that I love about this brace. And it gave incredible stability to my foot, and it is so strong. It gives rotational control. I'm talking this way, rotational control, and I loved it. But they were, they're fairly new to the market. The joint works beautifully. It is a massive spring here, so if you don't mind the size of it, that the whole thing works incredibly well. But they have, in my opinion, not quite perfected the fabricating of the carbon system, and so I've seen a number of these fail. And so what have I done as an orthotist? Typically, I'll ask them to build it with two joints, a small joint on this side and their one joint on this side, and that helps with all the stress and the strain on the carbon system here to reduce some of the strain on the brace itself, and those have seemingly worked very well. But I do, with all honesty, believe that in time, all of these companies get better with fabricating their devices. So, that's why I like sending these directly to a manufacturer who can stand behind their product and build a new one. And that's FatBrace is stellar with that. Okay, another question here. Is it possible to take proactive measures to prevent the need for bracing in AFOs? Yes. So the proactive measures would be stretching, trying to maintain your strength. I think just being well, eating well. I think starting sooner with simple things like foot orthoses. Simple inserts can be tucked away inside your shoe and can really help direct your foot. And it's this little stuff that I think makes a big difference over time. So being proactive with stretching and wearing something simple to begin with, I think can help. I'm an advocate of surgeries too. I think if you've got to be pretty uncomfortable, I think, for a surgery for you to really choose a surgery. But don't let things go so long and have your body in such a poor position that surgery can't. That bracing becomes really difficult later in life. If you're able to have a surgery to help reconnect or redirect or reposition your foot, I think I'm an advocate of that for sure, and that can help long term.
David, I'm just popping on to let you know we only barely have 2 minutes left. You have received a lot of questions in the Q&A, so I just want to let the audience know that we will do our best to address those after the summit. I'll coordinate with David and we'll figure something out, or perhaps we schedule a follow-up meeting, one of our monthly education meetings with David. But we just have a couple minutes left. A question that comes up all the time and consistently in the chat here is, how do we know when it's time to go to bracing? Like when it is time to start wearing braces, what are those signals and signs?
Yeah, I guess, so for me, I was 40 when I started to wear bracing. And but prior to that, I would say I wore custom foot orthoses since I was probably 6 or 8. So I was always wearing inserts, always had my foot in a fairly good position. I needed to have surgery on my one foot because we couldn't manage that when I was younger. So when I was 15, I had a triple arthrodesis on one side. And I guess that was because I was always twisting my ankle, always having injuries. And for me, it became easy to say that as a 15-year-old, I was tired of these injuries. So I was able to choose that. Now, after I had a great surgery, but after that, I knew that I didn't want to do that other foot until much later in life. I was probably 40, maybe 4, when I chose to have another surgery to that foot. because, again, I wasn't managing it well. And I was wearing bracing then. I was wearing a silicone AFO to help with the drop foot, but I still was uncomfortable. So I think pain should be your indicator. I think fatigue could be your indicator. I think that callousing could be your indicator. If you're not able to stand, oh, sorry, we at
I was just going to
time?
say, so it could be several things. Yeah, I know for me, I was 41 when I went to bracing, so similar to you, but I was taking terrible, terrible falls, and it was dangerous. It was really dangerous. We do have to wrap. I want to thank you for your time. I think we easily could have spent a couple of hours with you today. Your presentation was phenomenal. And again, everyone who joined us in this very large session, you had 161 people in here, David. Please know that we will do our best to follow up with you, and you are welcome to email your questions in to the CMTA, and we'll get those answered. Thank you again, David, and everyone can go back to sessions and join us in the next session. Have a great afternoon. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Laurel. Take care.
Bye-bye.